My name is Andrew Bullock. I'm the head of the corporate advisory team here at Gilbert and Tobin. I'm standing in today for Danny Gilbert, who unfortunately is up in Asia this week and sends his apologies, wishes he was here, was very pleased to be able to facilitate today and sorry that he isn't here. The first thing I just need to do is to give the welcome to country. So we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation, and acknowledge the elders past and present. Some of you who have been here since the earlier hours this morning will have already met in our boardroom, which is called Eora, and our commitment to these things at G&T is pretty significant. We're very pleased to be able to welcome everybody here today for this launch of Manufacturing Australia. We hope that you managed today to discuss many of the really important issues that are facing such an important area of the economy. And it seems that so far it's been successful, and we hope that for the rest of the day you get a good and informed discussion of a lot of the challenges that you face. Gilbert and Tobin, we act for some of you, but not enough of you, and we and we hope just by doing little things like this today that we become a little bit closer to you guys and what you do. We've part of the reason we've not acted for many of you is we've been historically just a Sydney-based firm, but in the last few years we have created a Melbourne office with some terrific people and a Perth office with some terrific people, and so we're very optimistic about how we're going to go in those places, and hopefully that will mean that we'll be working with more of you. A couple of housekeeping things before I hand over to people who need to run the day. The bathrooms are down this hallway over here, but to get to them you need to go out the back door, because if you open that door there, that camera will be shrouded and that camera is recording. The camera on the wall is recording today, so you need to go out the back. If you smell smoke, the fire escapes are over there as well. But it's a long way down, and hopefully that won't happen. So welcome everybody, and we hope you have a very good day. Cheers.
Well, good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Good. I always say on these occasions, nothing worse than a woman that can't be heard. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I think it's a very important day. Many of you may know that we have had industry meeting with members of the government earlier this morning. I think that meeting was broadly very constructive meeting. But my really important job later today is to get some real on the ground messages out from the chief executives from Manufacturing Australia to you all today. We've got some very interesting people in the audience. We've got representatives from government and from the opposition, journalists obviously, but also academics and others from industry. So it's my job, first of all, to introduce Dick Warburton to brief you on what today is about and the position of Manufacturing Australia. Dick, as you all will know, I'm sure, has worn this issue of manufacturing on his sleeve, but also captured hearts and minds, I think, for many, many years. A passionate supporter of Manufacturing Australia. He is the inaugural executive chairman of Manufacturing Australia. He's also chairman of, I think, still the Westfield Retail Trust. Is that correct? Magellan Flagship Fund, Citigroup, Pty, and he's previously been chairman and CEO of DuPont Australia and New Zealand, and he's been a long-serving board director. It's my great pleasure to welcome Dick Warburton.
Thank you, Tiki, and thank you to everybody for coming this morning. As Tiki mentioned, we did have a very useful, at least I hope it's useful, discussion this morning with some government representatives, and we'll be talking a bit later with the opposition or the coalition on these same sort of issues. But this is the combined forum in which we bring it all together. So thank you very much for joining us, and I hope we'll have a good panel discussion after my particular speech. Well, Australian manufacturing is currently fighting multiple fires on multiple fronts. Indeed, one could say that it's actually fighting for its life. The dearth of Australian manufacturing is forecast day after day as the media reports on factory closings, jobs being lost or sent offshore. We hear about challenges like the high Aussie dollar, the high input costs, the unbalanced competition with international importers, war for talent and industrial relations, the cost of running and constructing manufacturing plants, and excessive or inconsistent regulations. Now, none of these challenges by themselves are insurmountable, but cumulatively they are formidable. Now, meanwhile, the Australian community has watched a string of manufacturers, many of them household names with a proud heritage of innovation and iconic products, have been rushed into intensive care to be patched with taxpayer-funded subsidies. Commentators in the media, in industry, in academia, and in politics have been right to question the wisdom or longevity of this approach. We agree this is not sustainable. And yet the silver bullet solution to stop this pattern of decline has eluded us simply because there is no silver bullet. Worse, the perception that the damage to Australian manufacturing is irreparable has given rise to a dangerous line of argument in the national debate. This argument contends that perhaps Australian manufacturing is beyond saving, that we should accept that Australia's rich manufacturing heritage does not fit with the modern globalised world, and we should instead pass our manufacturing gauntlet onto other nations and focus our economic and policy efforts on other domestic industries. Ladies and gentlemen, Manufacturing Australia has invited you here today because we do not accept this dangerous argument. Manufacturing is the value-adding lifeblood of a balanced Australian economy. Until recently, this sector directly employed around 10% of the working population in stable and rewarding jobs. These are the kind of jobs around which communities are built, ancillary businesses established, cities grown, and families established. Through downstream wealth creation, import replacement and maximising the value of the natural resources, manufacturing delivers a return to the nation that far outweighs the investment it requires. Put simply, manufacturing is simply too important to the Australian economy and the nation to be allowed to continue to decline. Now, manufacturing has long been the silent workhorse of the Australian economy. The urgency of these issues has not been sufficiently recognised, in part because we are distracted by the good fortune of part of our economy, arising from the resources boom. But now, urgent action is required to revive Australian manufacturing and to address the compounding pressures that threaten the industry. That action needs to be bipartisan and supported by coordinated efforts of both private and public sectors and by governments and unions. Now, this morning I'll outline 4 key areas requiring immediate action by industry, government, unions and the broader community. Now, they're not exclusive. There are others that we want to look at too, and we will address those in a later stage. But at this stage, we're just going to focus on these 4 key areas. But before I do that, let me first say that our challenges are not unique to Australia. And let me briefly turn your attention overseas, where there are striking examples and correlations of how manufacturing underpins a nation's economy. One only has to look at some of the fragile economies of Western Europe to see what happens when you no longer have a healthy manufacturing base. But there are also success stories from which we can all learn. Germany, for example, has escaped the worst of the euro crisis because of its strong manufacturing base. Now contrast that with Spain and Italy, who rely extensively on tourism and other cyclical industries to maintain economic growth and employment, and I believe from that the lesson is pretty clear. Resources booms can't last forever. We cannot put all our eggs into a resources-led basket. Doing so would be exposing our economy to great risk. And while comparisons between thriving and struggling manufacturing nations usually point to the simplistic explanation that developed nations cannot compete with the lower input costs in China, India, or other developing nations, one only needs to look at the US manufacturing sector to show us that it's not anywhere near as simple as that. Now, there are currently signs that the United States' painfully slow recovery from the GFC is gathering pace, and that this recovery is being led by manufacturing, where 250,000 jobs were added in manufacturing last year. President Barack Obama has made domestic manufacturing a national priority, and we're fortunate to have one of the President's key advisors, Dow Chemical Global CEO Andrew Liveris, joining us a bit later for a panel discussion later today. He will sit in that seat that's empty over there at the moment. When I see the dominant economies in Europe, along with our counterparts in the USA, placing such emphasis on manufacturing as the key to economic prosperity, it gives me confidence that we can do the same here in Australia. The fact that we're all here together today, I hope, suggests that you believe that too. So what does Manufacturing Australia intend to do? Let me just quickly say that Manufacturing Australia at the moment is made up of 8 different companies. It may extend to 12, but that's probably where it'll be limited. Those 8 companies are BlueScope, Amcor, Incitec Pivot, Boral, Rheem, CSR, Capral and GWA. All of them have a very focus on manufacturing per se. It's not a competitor to AIG, it's not a competitor to BECA, but it was felt that this one group had to have a key focus just on manufacturing as opposed to the very broad church of the other organisations. All very good organisations, but they have a very broad church in what they do. This is a focused manufacturing group. The CEOs of each Manufacturing Australia member company have pledged to join forces in order to secure a brighter future for manufacturing. We want to be part of a dialogue that brings together both sides of politics, along with industry, to propose solutions that will address the issues affecting Australia's manufacturing industry. Now, Manufacturing Australia has identified 4 areas at this stage that require action by government and industry in order to revitalise its manufacturing sector and remain internationally competitive. First of those is industrial relations. Manufacturing Australia's guiding principle for workplace relations is that high levels of performance are gained through extensive, direct engagement with employees. This is supported preferably through individual agreements and, where necessary, collective agreements with employees. We believe this is the most effective way to build understanding of customer, employee and business needs at the local business level. And this has proved so very much in the past. We seem to have drifted away from that. We need to come back to it. Presently, the reverse case is in the past of what we did in the past. Direct relationships between employees and employers are undermined by third parties having the legislated right to become default bargaining representatives for employees, even when not appointed by those same employees. Further, current legislation extends collective bargaining rights beyond matters directly related to the employment relationship and the specific needs of the local enterprising unit. The result is protracted and inefficient bargaining that is often not relevant to the employee's circumstances or those of the particular business. In a column in The Australian last week, Mike Beardsall, over here, of Boral, a founding Manufacturing Australia member, wrote that job security can only be achieved through flexibility and improvements in productivity that strengthen the competitiveness of the business. Further, he wrote that it's a sad indictment of our industrial relations system that closing a factory is industrially easier to achieve than shedding 10% of the workforce or outsourcing non-core activities so the factory can be kept open. Now obviously, either of these scenarios are not a great outcome, yet judged dispassionately, one is surely much better than the other. If we're to maximise productivity and competitiveness in Australian manufacturing, employees and employers need to work collaboratively towards outcome in the best interest of the company and, by definition, its employees. The disproportionate amount of cost, time and resources spent on administration and compliance with the Fair Work Act could be greatly reduced by removing the legislated default of third-party employee representation and instead adopting an emphasis on direct engagement between employees and employers. The second policy issue is to do with anti-dumping and trade, because anti-dumping is another issue causing heated federal debate right now, and so it should. Australia is a trade-oriented economy and has benefited over the last 30 years by pursuing an open trade agenda. Manufacturing Australia favours open trade where that occurs fairly. However, what Australia's manufacturers cannot continue to withstand is unfair trade that leads directly to the loss of jobs, loss of Australian capability and vulnerability to price increases. Now, over 90 countries, including Australia, have anti-dumping mechanisms in place to promote fair trade. But the efficiency and effectiveness of those mechanisms must improve. We're moving well, but we've got more to do in this area. Those improvements must address issues associated with the recognition of China as a free market economy. They must overhaul the electronic public register, and they must upgrade the skills and access to subject matter experts for customs personnel. This is where Australian industry has a partnership role to play with government collectively. Now, the Australian government has rightly recognised the need to promote Australian industry participation in both public and private sector projects. Policies such as the Tariff Concession Scheme, the Enhanced Bylaw Scheme and the Industry Capability Networks are designed to help Australian manufacturing supply products for local projects. But again, such policies must be appropriately supported and resourced at implementation if they are to be effective. Industry Capability Network databases should be comprehensive and current, but they are not. Notification of projects should occur at an early planning stage to allow for production and project management preparations. Projects should be debundled to provide great opportunity for local products, and appeals processes should apply to the enhanced bylaw scheme. Now, sailing the rough seas of global competition has brought Australia unprecedented growth and a rise in our standard of living, in part because Bob Hawke and Paul Keating recognised the need for a firm hand at the tiller. Today, we need that firm hand more than ever, as the dynamics of global trade, particularly in our Asia-Pacific region, shift beneath our feet. Third area is regulation. Having looked at the impact of regional pressures, I'd like to turn attention to the matter of domestic productivity, and specifically the burden of red tape and the regulation that continues to strangle industry and restrict productivity. Again, I'll borrow from Mike Beardsall. I was taught very early in my piece that steal shamelessly. So I'm doing exactly that at the moment from Mike's talk, who wrote last week that asking what the Gillard government should do to assist Australian manufacturers is the wrong question. Better to ask, what should the government stop doing? Government regulations are an important part of the Australian manufacturing sector. We don't deny that, where they can encourage continuous improvement without damaging the economic value, competitiveness or normal functioning of business. But regulations that are applied inefficiently or inconsistently, which change frequently without proper consultation with industry, or which directly contradict other regulations, are smothering Australian manufacturers who should be focused on seizing commercial opportunities, not on regulatory compliance. The introduction of a carbon tax was designed in part to replace the myriad inefficient state and federal schemes that were in existence to reduce our carbon emissions. Yet most of those inefficient schemes remain in place and look likely to be expanded alongside the introduction of the carbon tax. Although, as we've seen in the last 2 days in Victoria and Queensland, there are steps to dismantle some of those which just duplicate the work that's being done at a federal level. I think that's a very valuable step. One of our Manufacturing Australia members, REAM, has to deal with no less than 40 regulatory bodies to manufacture and market hot water heaters, leading to the absurd scenario where one authority insists that REAM invest in efficiency improvements to a product that another authority has declared will no longer be eligible for sale within a decade. Absurd. We need to roll back the regulations, especially where the regulations add no economic value or competitive advantage. We need to eliminate duplication and inconsistency between different levels of government or agencies. And we need to strengthen those regulations that actually have proven effective in improving the productivity and competitiveness of Australian manufacturers. Again, this is a job for industry and government to tackle in partnership. Finally, resource allocation and pricing. This is perhaps the most striking example of how Australia is failing to realise one of our key manufacturing advantages, namely our abundant national resources. Australian manufacturers depend upon reliable supplies of energy and resources priced competitively in order to manufacture a range of vital commodities. We have those in abundance. The resources boom is evidence to that. And yet, presently, access to domestic sources of energy by Australian manufacturers is made difficult by policy confusion, by perverse incentives for international competitors, and pricing uncertainty or inconsistencies. Australian manufacturers are currently facing export-level prices for future gas contracts, which are approximately double the production cost, with a further risk that gas is not even available for domestic use at any price. To explain what that means to Australian manufacturers, let me paraphrase from a recent speech to the American Chamber of Commerce in Australia by James Farazino. You can see I don't hesitate to steal shamelessly. CEO of Incitec Pivot Limited, who's a founding member of Manufacturing Australia. And this may better illustrate my comments about the US manufacturing-led recovery I mentioned earlier. James told a tale of two ammonia plants, one proposed for the United States, the other for Australia. The development in the US may happen, he said, but the plant in Australia won't happen. Why? There are a number of reasons, but one of the most critical is gas. Remembering that natural resources are one of Australia's competitive advantages. Gas is the raw material for making ammonia. Both the United States and Australia have booming gas industries, but let's look at the different approaches. President Obama made energy a major theme in his 2012 State of the Union address. He said, "We have a supply of natural gas that can last America nearly 100 years, and my administration will take every possible action to safely develop this energy." Experts believe that this will support more than 600,000 jobs by the end of the decade. In Australia, we too have abundant gas, but our lack of vision means that it will be processed through giant refrigerators to send overseas for others to value add. The export of gas creates a three-time value add. If we use some of Australia's gas for high value added manufacturing, we could achieve a return on investment, in the case of Incitec Pivot in this case, of up to 20 times, not 3 times, 20 times. And that number does not include the further value add when our products are used in the agriculture and resources industries in Australia. Now, an argument frequently put by Andrew Liveris of Dow, and I hope he can expand on it later this morning, is that the countries where manufacturing flourishes are those countries which identify and exploit their natural resources, and in particular, energy. Australia is squandering one of its key competitive manufacturing advantages through short-sighted energy policy. Importantly, only the government has sufficient involvement with all points of the energy industry to maximise the entire energy value chain through deliberate, positive policy measures. That's what is being done in the United States, and it's a fundamental part of what we should be doing in Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, the priorities I have outlined this morning are 4 areas of policy and industry reform that can make a real difference to the competitiveness and sustainability of Australian manufacturing. They are areas that can deliver an impact in the near term, while also positioning the industry for better long-term performance. They are also matters that we believe will be acceptable to both sides of politics, as well as industry. But first, we need to collectively ask ourselves a very simple question. Do we want manufacturing to be an important part of Australia's future, or do we not? If we take that question seriously and answer it honestly and pragmatically, as other successful manufacturing nations have done, the challenges I've outlined this morning become nothing more than obstacles for us to overcome in the interest of the nation. We are not looking for a bailout. We are looking for government engagement and appropriate policy infrastructure which generates and meets demand for skilled employment, adds value to other domestic industries such as resources and agriculture, identifies and cultivates export markets and also showcase Australian innovation. Manufacturing is not like other industries. It is a highly strategic industry whose importance to society is measured in more than just its economic value. Investing, and I use the term investing very deliberately, in the sustainability of strategic industries such as manufacturing is about making a considered and deliberate decision to invest in sectors that deliver economic, social and cultural returns to the nation. Reviving Australian manufacturing requires a strong nationwide cultural reform here and now to stop the erosion of a once great industry that remains the backbone of Australia's future competitiveness, trade outlook and prosperity. And it's going to need some passion, it's going to need some focus to achieve all that. I thank you.